Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Children's History video podcast. We're going to learn lots about the past and how it shaped our lives today. Today's topic includes someone I'm sure a good number of you will have heard of, and another that you may not. They are two Celtic queens who lived during the Roman invasion and had contrasting relationships with Rome. Our two key questions to explore for each queen are: number one, who were they? And number two, should we remember them? Then, after our two episodes, we'll finish with a question for you to consider and you can try and answer it. So, who are they then? Cartimandua is queen number one, and she will be our focus today. And Boudicca is our subject for next time. The sources you can see are paintings done far after the two queens had lived. The image of Boudicca is an engraving from 1793, and the image from Cartimandua was done roughly around the same time. Okay, so on the screen you can see the beginnings of our timeline. It goes up in 200 years, and that's our scale. Each of those blocks represents 200 years worth of history. The green is AD, and the blue is BC, but that arrow that's just appeared is a reminder that history goes far further into the past than I can show on this screen, and that we need to focus on today. So let's begin with now. That's where we are today. As we travel back in time, we'll start to think about events that have occurred. So I've just added the First World War on. We mark the end of that on November the 11th each year. But for today, we're travelling far further into the past. That red bar represents the Roman period of British history, and the brown one that's just appeared represents the Stone Age to Iron Age. It's called prehistory. Now, the Stone Age to Iron Age is enormous. We could never represent that physically because it's just so huge. But for us today, we only need to think about that span of time inside the purple box. Now, do you remember those two images I showed you before? Well, that's when they were painted. So they were created much closer to today than the events they were showing. So we are travelling a long time into the past. Okay, so let's take a look at Cartimandua. 3 questions. Number 1, where did she reign over? We'll be looking at the key points during her reign, and then thinking about how is she remembered. So her tribe, they were called the Brigantes, and on that map, on the right hand side of the screen, you can see a darker red area. That represents how much land the tribe occupied. Underneath it, you can see the black lines. They're the modern counties that we have today. So, which modern counties did they cover? I'll tell you about some. Yorkshire, Lancashire, Durham, Northumberland, and parts of others. That's a huge amount of land, isn't it? And then some key settlements that were part of that kingdom. Eboracum, that's the city of York, which was an incredibly significant city all through history. Cataractonium, that's Catterick. And then Vinovium is Binchester. Now, just to make you aware, there are far more, but they're 3 just that I picked out for us. Okay, moving on. Let's take a look at the key events during her reign. The scale of our timeline has changed from before, hasn't it? The scale now works in 2 years, not 2 centuries, so we have zoomed in quite a lot. History existed before and continued after, so that's why we need our 2 arrows. Unfortunately, due to the fact the Iron Age people of Britain didn't write things down, we are somewhat limited in what we know. But some of the key events were recorded by Roman writers of the time. AD 43. The invasion of Britain by Emperor Claudius. Julius Caesar had tried to invade around 100 years earlier, but this time the Romans were here to stay. Some tribes resisted the Roman rule and fought against them. Cartimandua saw the might of Rome and cooperated. Her tribe, the Brigantes, became what is known as a client kingdom. and paid money to Rome and made sure there was a supply of slaves and people to join the army. But in return, she kept her lands, her power, and could be protected if needed. Hold on to that information, we might need to think about it in a bit. Caratacus was one such leader who fought against the Romans, and he was reasonably successful until he was defeated in Wales. Then, in AD 51, he asked Cartimandua for sanctuary. What do you think she did? You've already seen the pair of them in the first image I showed you. She put him in chains and handed him over to Rome. The Romans rewarded her with wealth, but it did make her unpopular with the other Celtic tribes. Around AD 54, Roman cohorts are sent to support Cartimandua against a rebellion. So because she supported the Romans and handed over Caratacus, the Romans supported her when there was a rebellion. A bit later on, in AD 69, her former husband leads a rebellion against her, and she is forced to flee to the protection of Rome. The leader, Venutius, is bitterly anti-Roman, and this leads to the eventual conquest of the Brigantes kingdom. Now that we know a bit about her, let's think about how is she remembered at the moment? Well, she isn't, is she? Why should she be remembered, though? Let's think about that. She ruled over a huge Iron Age kingdom. She cooperated with the Romans, and it was mutually beneficial. Both sides did benefit. And as a queen, she shows a different side to the Iron Age tribes. She was clever, thoughtful, and political. By the way, there is Caratacus. Told you who was in that image. Let's finish on the key information to remember from this. Number 1, she was a significant queen. Important Roman historians called Ptolemy and Tacitus wrote about her. She realised that trying to fight the Romans, it was not a viable option, and she successfully cooperated with them. And then as a client kingdom, she was protected by the Romans when attacked. And handing over Caratacus earned her wealth, so benefited her again. I hope you've enjoyed learning about Cartimandua. She is one of my favourites. Next time, remember, we're going to learn about the story of Boudicca, who you're more likely to have heard of.